Captain Chakotay returns, some links back to past Star Trek episodes, and a special appearance by a legacy character. This video proudly brought to you by World of Warships. Hey everyone, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, we're into part 2 of the second season of Star Trek Prodigy, up to episodes 11 and 12, which are entitled The Last Flight of the Protostar, parts 1 and 2. And today we're going to have a look through these 2 episodes of Prodigy and see what they were all about. This episode features a very prominent return of Captain Chakotay, Robert Belcher reprising his role from Voyager, in a kind of Castaway-esque episode of Prodigy. Picking up pretty much where we left off from the last episode, we start this episode seeing Chakotay gathering food and making shelter, and a bit of a sort of a time-lapse montage of him carving sculptures of his former crew that he's obviously lost and lamenting about. We're around 10 years on since Chakotay and Adric left Solem and took off and have obviously abandoned the ship on some uninhabitable planet as a means of keeping the Protostar safe from the Federation, because it's got the construct on board which Chakotay obviously doesn't want to fall into the hands of the Federation and cripple the fleet. Go boldly into an amazing free-to-play naval warfare-themed game in collaboration with Star Trek. It's
World of Warships meets the Final Frontier.
Don't miss a chance to turn your fleet into a star fleet with these permanent camouflages and commanders with individual voiceovers.
You're our last hope. The fate of the United Federation of Planets depends on you.
Live long and prosper.
Our strike has pierced the foe's armor!
This is Sela. The base must be shielded at all costs.
Become the ultimate warrior of the seas and space with Vulcan logic, Romulan slyness, Federation ideals, and Klingon battle prowess. Why don't you visit the interactive Captain's Bridge, where the ship's AI can give you the news?
A gaseous anomaly has been detected.
Enter battles as a fierce Klingon warrior with the cruiser Fiji as a Klingon bird of prey. Show no mercy to your opponents with the Romulan warbird for Akatsuki. Defend the principles of the United Federation of Planets by turning your aircraft carrier Enterprise into the Enterprise D. Log into World of Warships and get beamed to Vulcana's A2 as a free special port. Experience thrilling battles on PC, console, or mobile. Jump into the game for this special Star Trek event. Let's voyage to the Final Frontier.
Use the promo code Final Frontier and check out the link in the description for this amazing Star Trek collaboration. Next we see the kids trapped in one of Chakotay's little traps there in a net. He's been marooned there for quite some time. He's talking to hologram Janeway, a bit like Tom Hanks talked to Wilson on the island there in Castaway. And he's kind of gone a little bit grumpy and, you know, over the time he's there, been marooned there by himself. And the kids try to fill him in on basically what's happened to them, what the deal is with the construct, and how the ship already ended up back in the future, and it did infect the Federation, but they saved the day by destroying it, and all this, it all kind of worked out. But Chakotay's not all that receptive to their convincing story. In fact, he gives a very blunt no to them, which kind of reminds me of how Liam Shaw responded to Picard and Riker. A little bit of a hark back to that. It's quite a dangerous planet they're on. It's certainly not an inhabitable planet to any great extent. There's massive ion storms and everything that are constantly rolling in. There's obviously wildlife that is quite dangerous. It's not a comfy, cushy, relax under a palm tree kind of planet. Grumpy Chakotay gets a bit of a pep talk from hologram Janeway, talking about compassion for the kids. Remember the ideals of Starfleet and so forth, and he kind of begrudgingly lets them on board. It would appear that in the last 10 years, the Protostar has fallen into quite a state of disrepair. It's got no protocore, it's got no warp core, it's got almost no power whatsoever. Certainly things like replicators and all that sort of thing haven't been active, and Chakotay's just been eating fruit and eating caviar off some fish while he's been there. It would seem like he ejected the warp core and the protocore as a means of keeping the ship, abandoned on the planet. I like the little riff Chakotay makes on Spock's mantra of the needs of the many, talking about the needs of the many versus the comfort of the few. I thought that was a nice little spin on that. Dal kind of challenges Chakotay a little bit in this episode. We sort of see his wooden offices that he's carved there, all of the previous members of his crew. And you can tell there's quite a bit of grief there in terms of what happened. He was the captain, but he's kind of the lone survivor of the entire crew of the Protostar. and that's obviously weighing on his conscience quite a bit. We see in a photo some members of his crew. We get a little bit more of an insight into who was part of Chakotay's crew, and we see a few interesting faces there. On the left of frame there, we see a Xindi arboreal, which we haven't seen for quite some time. Interesting. We've got an Andorian female and a human female, Chakotay there in the middle, then a Bolian, we've got a Dreek there, another appears to be human female, and a male Edosian, the same race as Arex from the animated series. And it seems like a Dreek was lost trying to come up with some sort of means of getting off the planet. The kids decide that they need to fix not only the ship to get off the planet, but they need to fix Chakotay. He's obviously down in the dumps. He needs a bit of his spirits buoyed to try to get off world and get back in the game again. And we see a bit of a montage of the kids fixing up the ship, getting it prepped to go, all of the maintenance that needs to happen to get it back into a sort of an operational state to have a chance at getting up off the planet. We see Del getting some fruit here and a sinkhole forming in the ground. There's a storm coming. There's a bit of a ticking clock scenario going on here, so you can kind of feel the tension building. All of a sudden, Del is missing, and they have to use the Runaway, this all-terrain vehicle from the Protostar, to try to find him. And we get quite an exciting sequence of them racing through tunnels, getting pursued by these big sand dragons. Pretty exciting kind of chase sequence. This sort of reminds me a bit almost Dune-esque with the big worms there coming through the sand and everything. These are sort of big eels or big dragons they've got pursuing him here. Yeah, it's quite an exciting sequence. We've got Murph tagging along as well, acting as security or an extended seatbelt applier in this case. And after a quite exciting pursuit there by the big sand dragons or whatever, we end up in a cave where we find the body of a Dreek. He obviously found a cave that was covered in all this minerals and stuff that was creating energy, and he'd managed to fashion a container and gather a certain amount of antimatter, which was his plan all along, but he obviously was killed, I guess, by the sand dragons before he had a chance to get back to Chakotay with the antimatter. But the good news is they have some fuel now to get the ship kind of, up and running a little bit. They have a memorial for a Dreek, and they work out that in order to get the ship back up in orbit again, it has to sail before it can fly. Back up on Voyager, we see the Voyager undergoing a lot of repairs and everything after that big loom attack in the last double-part episode. And with Janeway a little bit confused about the messages and information she got from Wesley Crusher, decides to reach out to Beverly Crusher via comms to see if she can shed a bit more light on the subject of her son. It was great to see Gates McFadden here as Beverly Crusher, but I kind of got to say, the appearance of Beverly Crusher in this communication with Janeway, if it hadn't have been voiced by Gates McFadden, I probably wouldn't have immediately known this was Beverly Crusher. I think the Beverly Crusher we saw on the view screen here was a lot closer visually to how we saw Beverly in Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. I mean, it almost seems like she's wearing exactly the same jacket she wore in Picard. And I was kind of expecting to see a Beverly a little bit closer to how we saw her, say, in Star Trek Nemesis. Because the events of Prodigy Season 2 are only really meant to take place about 5 years after Star Trek Nemesis. So Beverly should look a lot closer to how she did in that, rather than the plus 22 years she looked in Star Trek Picard Season 3. So I think stylistically the animators probably should have skewed a little bit towards the Nemesis Beverly and not quite so extremely towards the Season 3 Picard Beverly. Maybe just a little bit more red in the hair and not quite so much grey perhaps. But nonetheless, it was interesting to hear Beverly talk to Janeway, referencing things like Shinzon from obviously Star Trek Nemesis, as Janeway was the admiral that gave them that mission, and the fact that Picard's off doing the whole Romulan relocation thing, which gives us a nice grounding point to where our series here is situated within the Star Trek timeline. Back on the planet, the kids are prepping the Protostar for launch. The warp drive has some power, but it looks like they're going to have to traverse the vapor ocean on the planet before they can take off, because they need to gather enough deuterium in the Bystam collectors in order to take off. So they've got to sail across this ocean in order to do that. Well, we get a pretty exciting sailing montage here with all the kids working on different things on on different sails and different ropes and different rigging and everything to get it over the vapor ocean. Dal isn't maybe doing the best job, and him and Chakotay have a bit of a heart-to-heart talk. He talks about his future glimpse that he observed during the little incident with Wesley Crusher in the last episode, but Chakotay gets his spirits up a little bit, talking about how he was a little bit lost and everything, and talks about his experiences in joining the Marquis before he really kind of found his home on board the Voyager under Janeway. We get these huge eels coming through the ocean with the ship as well. We've got this big vortex storm going on. The ship is taking an absolute hammering. They have to free a bunch of debris from the rudder in order to get it going. It was quite an exciting sailing sequence, I thought. You wouldn't think sailing a starship across a vapor ocean would be all that kind of riveting, but I think they did a good job of capturing some nautical excitement here in this episode. They swirl around the vortex there enough times to fill the tanks with deuterium, but unfortunately Chakotay has a bit of a spill on the deck. He goes overboard, and Dal has to go to the rescue to save him. And obviously, with a little bit of help from some of the eels on the planet, he manages to get himself and Chakotay saved from this predicament. So I guess Dal, gains a little bit of confidence and a little bit more leadership skill under his belt, I guess, in this selfless act. The deuterium tanks get filled, and the ship gets to take off. They're headed off to Voyager. But they've only got warp drive. They haven't got the proto drive, which means they can only do a certain warp speed. And obviously to get back to Voyager, they're going to need some pretty serious engine power in the form, I guess, of repairing the proto drive, which I'm assuming is going to be the mission for our next episode. All in all, I think this was quite an exciting double episode. It had a really strong performance, I thought, by Robert Beltran as Chakotay. It's probably the most we've seen from Chakotay in Prodigy so far, appearing in this episode. All the other appearances we've had from up to this date have just been little shorter flashbacks. And we've got a little bit more of him at the start of this season, but I kind of feel like we're getting a lot of coverage from some of these legacy characters in Prodigy now, whereby we've got, obviously involvement from Janeway and Chakotay and the Doctor and Wesley Crusher and Beverly Crusher and everything in this episode. So we've got a lot of legacy appearances this season, which is really good. But guys, let me know what you thought of episodes 11 and 12 of Season 2 Star Trek Prodigy, The Last Flight of the Protostar. Leave your thoughts in the comments section and we'll get chatting about that. Please be sure to subscribe to Sci-Finatics if you haven't done so already. I really appreciate your support there. And also be sure to check out my merch in the merch store. Plenty of cool Star Trek themed t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, caps, stickers, all that kind of stuff. Sci-fi themed, Star Trek themed. You can always pick up a great bargain in the store, and it also helps support the channel as well. I'll be back very soon with my next review for, I guess it'll be episode 13 and 14 of Season 2. I'll catch you guys then.